I'm 64. Stop going soft after 60 with this one rule. When I was younger, I used to think growing old happened all at once. I thought one day you woke up and suddenly your back hurt, your energy disappeared, your confidence faded, and somehow life quietly folded in on itself. That's what I believed in my 40s. Then I reached my 50s and realized aging doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives like dust settling on furniture. Quiet, slow, almost invisible until one day you notice the room doesn't feel the same anymore. And I'll tell you something else that took me most of my life to understand. Men don't become weak because they turn 60 or 70. They become weak because they slowly start making deals with themselves. Small deals. Tiny little conversations nobody hears except the man having them. That's where the softness begins. Not in the muscles, not in the knees, not even in the heart. It begins in the private negotiations you have with yourself before your feet even touch the floor in the morning. I know because I've lived it myself. There was a time after I retired when I started slipping without realizing it. Nothing dramatic. That's the dangerous part. Life rarely falls apart dramatically at our age. It fades little by little. I stopped waking up early. Then I stopped taking my walks every morning. Then I started leaving little chores unfinished because I told myself I'd do them tomorrow. I began sitting longer in my chair after breakfast. I stopped caring how I dressed if I wasn't going anywhere. One small thing at a time. And every single excuse sounded reasonable in the moment. That's the frightening thing about excuses when you're older. They sound wise. They sound earned. You tell yourself, I worked hard my whole life. I deserve to rest. And yes, rest matters. Of course it does. But there's a difference between resting and surrendering. A big difference. One restores you. The other slowly erases you. I remember one winter morning very clearly, cold enough that the windows had fog on them. My knees were aching. My shoulder hurt from an old injury I carried for 30 years. I sat at the edge of the bed staring at my boots on the floor, and I had this little argument in my head. Skip the walk today. Just today. The weather's miserable anyway. Now when I was younger, I thought discipline meant being intense, loud, motivated, fired up. But sitting there that morning, I realized discipline is actually quiet. It's not dramatic at all. It's simply the moment you stop arguing with yourself. I put my boots on, walked outside into the freezing air, and I remember feeling miserable for the first 10 minutes. But when I got home, something inside me felt awake again. Not younger, not stronger, just awake. Like I had reminded myself I was still alive and still in charge. That morning taught me something I wish somebody had told me when I was 30. You should never negotiate with yourself after the decision has already been made. If you decided yesterday you were going to walk this morning, then the conversation is over. The tired version of you doesn't get a vote anymore. Because tired people make comfortable decisions. Disciplined people make clear decisions ahead of time. And at my age, clarity matters far more than motivation. Motivation disappears all the time. Some mornings you wake up ready to conquer the world. Other mornings you feel heavy before breakfast. If your entire life depends on how inspired you feel that day, you'll spend half your life sitting still. That's why routines matter so much as you grow older. People think routines make life boring. I think routines save lives. They saved mine. Every morning I wake up, wash my face, make my bed, put on proper clothes, and go outside for a walk before I allow myself to sit too long. I do it whether I feel good or not. Some days I enjoy it. Some days I complain under my breath the whole time. Doesn't matter. The routine isn't there to entertain me. It's there to protect me from the version of myself that wants comfort over life. And let me tell you, comfort is seductive after 60, dangerous too. Your body wants softness. The chair feels better than the walk. Staying home feels easier than calling friends. Television feels easier than learning something new. Little by little, your world shrinks if you let it. And shrinking happens so quietly, you barely notice until one day your confidence is gone. You stop trying new things. You stop speaking up. You stop taking care of yourself because somewhere deep down, you've accepted the lie that your meaningful years are behind you. That's a terrible thing for a man to believe. Terrible. Because as long as you wake up breathing, life is still asking something from you. I've met men in their 80s who feel more alive than men in their 50s. And the difference usually has nothing to do with money or health. It's attitude. The older men who stay sharp still hold themselves accountable for small things. They shave even when nobody's visiting. They keep promises to themselves. They show up on time. They take care of their homes. They stay curious. One friend of mine is 82 years old and still reads history books every night before bed. Another old fellow I know lost his wife years ago, but every Sunday morning he irons a clean shirt before church, even though nobody would care if he didn't. Those things sound small to younger people, but they aren't small. Those are signs a person hasn't abandoned themselves yet. And I'll confess something to you honestly. There were years when I almost abandoned myself too, especially after loss entered my life. Losing people changes a man. My father died when I was still young enough to need advice. My wife became ill years later, and watching someone you love suffer changes the way silence sounds inside a house. After she passed, there were mornings I didn't want to get out of bed at all. The loneliness at our age is something younger people don't fully understand yet. The house becomes too quiet. Dinner feels strange when there's only one plate on the table. You catch yourself turning to say something to someone who isn't there anymore. Those moments can break a person if they stay sitting in them too long. And that's when the negotiations become most dangerous, because grief whispers very softly. It says, "Not today. Sit a little longer, skip the walk, leave the dishes. Call your daughter tomorrow instead." Grief makes inactivity feel reasonable, but I learned something important during those years alone. Movement creates life, even small movement. Especially small movement. Some mornings all I could manage was making coffee, opening the curtains, and walking to the mailbox. But I did it anyway because I understood something by then. If you stop moving entirely physically or emotionally, life starts closing doors around you without asking permission. And once life starts closing those doors, reopening them becomes harder than most people realize. That's why I tell older men, and women too, don't wait until you feel strong again before you begin living. Strength often comes after the movement, not before it. People have that backwards. They think motivation arrives first and action follows. In my experience, action comes first. The feeling follows later, sometimes quietly, sometimes not at all, but the action still matters. There were mornings after my wife passed when I walked through the neighborhood feeling absolutely nothing. No joy, no inspiration, just the sound of my shoes against the pavement and cold air on my face. But after enough mornings like that, something inside me slowly began waking back up. Not because I solved grief. You never completely solve grief. You simply learn how to carry it without letting it bury you. And carrying life properly becomes very important after 60 because nobody is coming to rescue you from your own habits. That's another truth people don't talk about enough. At our age, your daily habits either become your strongest allies or your quietest enemies. The little things matter more than ever. Staying connected to people matters. Taking care of your body matters. Keeping your word to yourself matters. Even simple things like getting dressed properly in the morning matter more than people think. I know some younger folks laugh at that kind of advice. They think it sounds old-fashioned. But there's dignity in preparing yourself for the day. There's dignity in looking in the mirror and saying, I'm still here, and I still respect the life I've been given. I learned that lesson from my grandfather long before I understood it. That old man woke up before sunrise almost every day until the week he died. Didn't matter if nobody was visiting. Didn't matter if he had nowhere special to go. He shaved, combed his hair, polished his shoes, sat at the kitchen table with a straight back like life still expected something from him. And maybe it did. Back then I thought he was stubborn. Now I realize he was protecting himself from decline, not physical decline alone, spiritual decline, emotional decline, the kind that happens when a person slowly stops participating in their own life. That's why I say, softness begins long before the body changes. It begins when you stop expecting anything from yourself, when you stop holding your standards, when you begin saying things like, I'm too old for that now. I've heard men say they're too old to travel, too old to make friends, too old to learn technology, too old to fall in love again, too old to start hobbies, too old to exercise, too old to change. And every time they repeat those words, they build another wall around themselves. After a while, they're living in a prison they constructed with their own thinking. Now listen, I'm not pretending aging is easy. It isn't. Your body changes whether you like it or not. Some mornings you wake up stiff for no reason. Sometimes names slip your mind. Sometimes you walk into a room and forget why you entered it. You lose people. Friends disappear. Your world changes shape over and over again. There are days when growing older feels deeply unfair, but there's also something beautiful about this stage of life if you stop resisting it long enough to see clearly. There's wisdom in surviving difficult years. There's peace in no longer needing to impress everybody. There's freedom in understanding what truly matters and what never did. When I was younger, I wasted enormous energy worrying about things that seem ridiculous to me now. Money, status, proving myself, winning arguments that changed nothing. Old age stripped some of that nonsense away. These days, I value simple things more than anything. A good conversation, morning sunlight through the window, a phone call from my children, a warm cup of coffee, a quiet walk, the sound of laughter in another room. These things become precious because you finally understand life was never really built on the grand moments. It was built on ordinary days you barely noticed while you were rushing through them. But appreciating simple things should never become an excuse to stop growing. That's where many people make a mistake. Peace and surrender are not the same thing. You can accept aging without giving up on yourself. In fact, I think older people have a responsibility to keep growing. Younger generations are watching how we age. They're learning from us whether we realize it or not. If they see older people becoming bitter, passive, isolated, and defeated, then they'll fear aging their entire lives. But if they see older people staying curious, disciplined, warm-hearted, and engaged with life, then aging becomes something different. It becomes a season of wisdom instead of decline. I've noticed something else too. The people who remain strongest emotionally are usually the people who stay useful in some way. Maybe they help raise grandchildren. Maybe they volunteer. Maybe they mentor younger people. Maybe they simply become the calm presence others rely on during difficult times. Human beings need purpose. That never disappears. Retirement may end your career, but it should never end your usefulness. The moment a person believes they are no longer needed, something inside them begins shutting down. That's why I still keep routines. I still set small goals. I still try to learn things. Not because I'm trying to become extraordinary at this age, but because growth itself keeps the spirit alive. I've started reading more than ever before. I write things down now because memory isn't what it used to be. I take walks even when my knees complain. I call old friends instead of waiting with them to call me first. I apologize faster than I used to. Funny enough, age teaches you how little pride is worth. Most arguments aren't worth carrying into old age. Peace matters more. And if there's one thing I truly hope people understand from my years on this earth, it's this. The quality of your later years depends heavily on the conversations you allow yourself to have every day. Those quiet little negotiations shape your life more than dramatic moments ever will. I'll do it tomorrow. One missed day won't matter. I'm too tired. I'm too old. Those thoughts seem harmless, but repeated over months and years, they become your identity. On the other hand, small acts of discipline also become identity. Making the bed, going outside, keeping your appointments, taking care of your appearance, staying kind even when you're tired, staying involved in life when isolation feels easier. Those things matter deeply. So these days, when I wake up and hear that little voice telling me to stay comfortable, I try not to argue with it anymore. I simply stand up before the negotiation begins. I put my feet on the floor. I open the curtains. I make the coffee. I step outside. Because I've learned something after all these years. Life rarely asks us for greatness every day. Usually it just asks us to keep showing up, to keep participating, to keep choosing movement over surrender one ordinary morning at a time. And honestly, I think that's what keeps a person alive inside long after youth has passed. Not chasing perfection, not pretending you're still 30 years old, just refusing to quietly disappear before your time has truly come. Anyway, those are the thoughts of an old man tonight. I appreciate you spending this time with me truly. If something I said connected with you, hold on to it for tomorrow morning when that little negotiation begins again. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye for now.